My full name is Sherrie Mortensen Davis. I am 78. I will be 79 in a couple of months. I can't believe I'm really doing this, but I am telling my story. Now, this is the disclaimer. This is my story, so I'm going to tell it from my point of view. I don't want the Thanksgiving fight. And that is, at Thanksgiving time, we seem to sit at the table and we start talking about events, and someone says how it happened, and pretty soon someone says, oh, I was there, and it didn't happen like that at all. So we're going to avoid that today, because this story, I am here and my younger brother are still here and everyone else is gone. It's important for me to do this because I so wish that more of my ancestors had at least written something about themselves. Everything I have except for a few are grandchildren of them talking about their grandparents. And wouldn't you always like the best story? You'd like to hear it from how they did it. And so that is really what is behind it. I was born in Ogden, Utah, in the D Hospital on 24th Street and Harrison. I was raised mostly in Morgan County. The first place I remember was in a little log cabin on Richville Lane, where my older brother and I and my mother and dad lived. And it was literally a little log cabin. And my memories about that are what my mother told me. She said I would take the knives and forks and spoon and push them through the knot hole in the floor. I would play outside with my older brother Barry. There was a well house, and we used to like to run up and down the well house. And I have another memory of holding his hand and walking up that lane toward the Richville Church. Then my next memory I have, and I've thought about this, is my dad came home from the war and went to Utah State on the Veterans Plan. And I remember living in an Army Quonset. And I remember going to kindergarten there. And what I remember about kindergarten is we got to have crackers and milk and a nap. So I must not be too interested in everything else that was going on. My other memory from there is more of a nightmare. My older brother and I, we went to a movie, and it was one of those scary movies. And the bad guy was in the corner by the coat rack. Yeah, I didn't look at coat racks for a very long time. It scared me to death. After that, when he graduated, we moved to Ogden, Utah. And we lived out on 8th Street for a little while. And I went to the elementary school that was there. And then my mom and dad bought a home in Layton on Gentile. That was the road was a new home. Dad was working at Hill Air Force Base, and my mom was too. And I remember going to 2nd grade. I remember school. The teacher's name was Miss May. And I think she spanked me once for putting on lipstick. You could spank kids in those days because, how were they not to know that that was not okay? And my other memory of that school is not a good memory. We used to go across the railroad. And the school was on the west side. And one day when we got on the buses to go home, they just sat there and sat there. And pretty soon someone came by to tell us that 2 of the students at the school who walked home on their way home had waited for a train to go by but had stepped in front of the other. And actually, they were laying kind of in the gutter with the sheets over them. And I have always been very careful at railroad crossings since then. And then we moved, and I have no idea how my father talked my mother into this, out of that new home. back to Porterville into an old home. Now, this is the part that my kids and grandkids just aren't going to get, but it had no indoor bathroom. How my father talked my mother into moving out of a brand new home to this 25-acre farm with this big house with no bathroom. I will never know. And yes, I got a tub, brought it in the house, put it in the middle of the kitchen floor, filled it with hot water, and took a bath. From the time I was about 10 till I was 15. And around 15 to 16, my father built a home with a bathroom, 2 in fact, which was rather nice. And we had an outhouse. And you went to the outhouse or you went to the pot and took the pot to the outhouse. And I did this for, 7 years? I'll never know how my father talked my mother into that because she was very certain that everything should be clean and proper. We raised cabbage for Del Monte. Dad bought this 25-acre farm, and I decided it was because he thought his children should learn how to work. Because he didn't need a 25-acre farm to take care of his family. He did very well. And I remember to do a job right and do it right the first time. And this is how I remember that. We had just finished, and I don't know what there was, about 3 acres of rows of cabbage. My dad came back to check on us. It was hot. He picked up the hoe and he walked down the row, and then he looked at me and he said, if you're going to weed, cut the whole, don't just cut the top off. You have to cut the root off. And he proceeded to tell us that we needed to do all of the weeding again. And we did. And it was kind of like hot and uncomfortable, and I was kind of mad. But I learned if you're going to do it right the first time, so you don't have to do things twice. From my mother, I learned the value of family. And knowing her story of her birth and where she was raised, family was very important. Very, very, very important. She made my older brother and I and my younger brother always, it was a third equal of everything. She loved to have parties. She loved to cook meals for people. I loved to do that too. She liked to entertain and have people come in and feel comfortable. She was a great cook, great baker. And as I got older, her life had not been easy, but she just kept at it. My older brother was hardworking, very serious, but not really. I mean, he had this other side to him that he was fun. I mean, one Halloween, his and his friends put a wooden wagon on top of the stake center. And one time I went to school, and since the lockers didn't have doors on them, all of the books in the school were in a pile in the middle of the commons area. He never did say he did it, but I just knew it was him and his friends. He played football. He was a good student. He went on a mission to California, which was then California, Nevada, part of Arizona. He graduated from Utah State with a bachelor's and a master's degree. Maybe this could describe him the best. We went on a trip with him one spring. My family and his family and my brother's family. And so we loaded all the kids in the van, and we had these little walkie-talkies, and he had made all the reservations, and he had where we would be going through the parks at what time. And so he just had, and for the entire 5 days. And it's kind of a joke in the family. When we were going through Arches, he pulled over at the side of the road, and it was balancing rock. He said, Sherrie, you can take a picture now. And it's just been kind of my brother. My younger brother was very different. We spent a lot more time together. We played together. We'd play Mumbly Pig. We'd have races. We'd see who could balance the broom and walk across the yard. And doing that one day, we broke the broom. My mother insisted we bought a new broom. We had a gravel pit at the bottom of our farm that had a pond in it. I'm not really sure my parents knew about this, but we spent a lot of time on that little raft we'd made on top of that pond, just he and I. We'd go play in East Canyon Creek. I went out to do some chores one time, and we had a big granary, and I had to go into the granary. He managed to close the door behind me and lock it, which was claustrophobic panic. And pretty soon I looked up through the top, and he was looking through the hole and was just laughing his head off. Just thought it was the funniest thing ever. He did let me out. I did get even, though. He didn't like to be home alone at night when my parents were doing church callings. And so one night, while he was home alone, I went around in all the windows and scratched on them. And I had him in a state before I decided maybe I better quit it, because if I went in the house, he might hit me in the head with a bat or something. But, equal's equal with kids, isn't it? You like to do those kinds of things.
And how would they describe you?
I wrote this up one time. If I can share it with you. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Oh, of course, when I want to share it with you, I can't just get right at it. Growing up as a kid, I had my two brothers. And they had their lives, and I had mine. And I was probably a little different. I was the only daughter, but a mile down the road lived my Uncle Wayne and Aunt Marge, and they had 9 daughters. So I spent a lot of time down there playing with them. Whenever we went to my grandmother Rich's, we'd play, Annie, I over the garage. If I could be outside, I loved it. Absolutely loved being outside. And, we had a cow. I don't know if it was a Jersey or a Guernsey. But, I never learned to milk that cow because I knew if I did, my brothers would somehow not be home when it was time to milk that cow. As myself, I was always out. Behind our house was a grove of chokecherry trees that I spent a lot of time in, because I climbed the trees and you could walk through the whole orchard from branch to branch. And that was fun to me. I enjoyed that. It was a good thing to do. Speaking of Barry, one time we had some relatives visit, and they had gone with my mother to see my father's flower garden and his vegetable garden. And when they came back, he'd already cleaned up the chairs and put them away. He was just very particular. My mother was so embarrassed. Well, you don't have any place to sit. My son decided to clean everything up. As a child, for activities, we would go camping. And my dad would take us a week off in the summer, and we'd take the whole family and go camping. We'd go up a place called Sheep Canyon and put up the tent, put out the pots, put the pop in the creek, played in the creek. Just no responsibilities. At school, we couldn't do sports. We could do intramurals, but we could not do sports. So we played Have you ever seen girls play the girls' rules? You split your team in half, and half are on one side and half are on the other. One would be making the points, one would be defending. You got the ball, you could dribble down to the half mark, and then you had to pass it to the other kids. They would do whatever they could do with it, and then they would have to dribble it back and pass it across that line to you on the other side. You know, girls aren't strong enough to play basketball, you know. So they had this girl basketball thing they had set up. Used to drive me absolutely nuts. We had a women's softball team, the whole county did, kind of run by the church. You know, being able to play softball with a softball team at that time was about the only thing girls could do. There wasn't much else out there. I played it from the time I was 12 to I was probably 19. It was fast pitch softball, and I was the pitch. And I loved every minute of it. It was the greatest thing in my life. My hobbies involved 4-H. It was a really big thing in my life. I learned to cook, I learned to sew, I learned to do leather. I learned all those things through 4-H. With the same leader. Her name was Annabelle Porter. 4-H is run by the county cooperative, and kids take classes. I mean, they find someone who knows how to do something, and they have a book about it, and they come and teach you how to do it. Then when fair time comes around, you put the results of your labors in the fair. And I did that for years. Actually, the fair helped me buy school clothes sometimes. Because if you got a blue ribbon or a red, you know, you got money. You got to take the ribbons in and walk out with some money, and you spent 3 or 4 days at the fair with your friends and your parents, and it was great fun. Right? You know, some of my grandkids may not even know I rode horses. I rode horses from the time I could get on one. There's a picture somewhere of me being on a horse when I was about 2. I taught myself to ride. No lessons, just experience. I had a horse named Trudy, Welch pony, a bay, and my dad wouldn't let me ride with a saddle for a long time, so I just go out in the pasture and hop on her, ride her around. When she was tired of me, she'd go over by the fence and give a little buck. Yeah, she was done. And then later he bought a horse, Palomino, quarter horse, named Duke. That was just the love of my life. He was an ornery horse. He threw my mother off, broke her arm. When he would get out, he would run all over town, and the only one he'd let catch him was me. And I just would ride him. Oh, easy lope, gentle horse. I spent a lot of time on my own, riding up the foothills around Morgan, sometimes up the canyons. My parents really kind of did trust me.